There it is. He timed it right.
Counting to explode with the left. Oh, and that right, but Davis took off some of the steam of the punch, but still.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Devin Haney expects Canelo to shine against Christian Mbilli after losing his Ring Magazine, IBF, WBA, WBC, and WBO super middleweight titles to Terence Crawford last year. Canelo Alvarez underwent arthroscopic surgery on his left elbow. Now that he's all healed up, Alvarez has agreed to take on Mbilli, the ring's number 3 super middleweight and newly minted WBC champion in September. Mbilli, 31, might throw a ton of punches, but Haney doesn't believe Alvarez has much to worry about.
Another instance where the boxer doesn't give the best boxing takes.
There's nothing to indicate that Christian Mbilli is going to be a walk in the park or some kind of pushover for an aging Canelo Alvarez. Though in spite of this, Devin said, "I think it's going to be easy for Canelo. This style is tailor-made for him. He stands right there in front of you."
Which he does. But it can still be a physically taxing fight for a fighter who's now in his mid-30s, a year removed from the sport, and isn't getting younger, isn't getting faster.
Coming off of elbow surgery, it's a regular occurrence now for Canelo Alvarez after a fight to have some sort of nagging injury. It used to be a dodgy knee. After the Bivol fight, he said he hurt his hand. Now after the Crawford fight, he had a dodgy elbow.
The wear and tear is piling on. It's always something, so even if Mbilli presents a style that Canelo normally looks good against, I think it's a gross overestimation to now look at this fight and say, well, this is going to be easy for Canelo.
Standing and banging normally works for Mbilli, but in his last fight it nearly ended disastrously. On the undercard of Canelo vs. Crawford in Vegas, Lester Martinez battled Mbilli to a split draw, and the Cameroon native retained his WBC interim title. Mbilli, 29-0 with 1 draw and 24 knockouts, was eventually elevated to full champion in January of this year, after the World Boxing Council stripped Crawford of his crown for failing to pay a 6-figure sanctioning fee. Mbilli was then ordered to fight Hamza Shiraz for the newly vacated title, but the popular British star went in another direction. He'll face Alem Bejic for the WBO title. On May 23rd at the Pyramids at Giza in Giza, Egypt, over the last few years, Alvarez, who's ranked at number 1 by Ring Magazine at super middle, has been viewed as a declining fighter. That might be the case, but that doesn't impact Haney's opinion. I think he's a guy who's going to come forward and he's going to be right there, he said. I think Canelo is going to go in there and do typical Canelo things.
So it's important to note that both Canelo and Christian would have been out for about roughly a year's time the night of the fight. On one end, you could argue that given Canelo's got so much wear and tear and nagging injuries, the added time off might have done him some good, given him additional time to recover. Not rushing back to have another fight and incurring another injury might be a good thing.
It might be, but we really won't know until we see him.
Did the time off do him good, or did it just make him rusty? And what about Christian? He will have been out for the same amount of time. How is that going to affect him?
He is the younger, fresher fighter. Not as much wear and tear as Canelo. Even if a bit of ring rust has accumulated, maybe it doesn't affect him as much as it affects Canelo.
They're playing it safe.
Team Mbilli, they could have easily scheduled a little stay-busy fight, a little tune-up fight for Christian to give him something to do in the interim en route to the Canelo fight, but they don't want to take any chances. The Canelo-Alvarez fight presenting the biggest payday on the biggest stage they would have ever fought on, they're playing it safe.
Even if that means allowing a bit of ring rust to collect, they're not going to jeopardize the Canelo fight by taking another fight in the interim, even if it's a tune-up, lest they want to risk an injury.
A sprain, a strain, a cut.
They're not going to risk it. Even if that means allowing a bit of ring rust to collect, it's still no more ring rust than what Canelo is allowing to collect, because you guys have been out the same amount of time.
So, if that's supposed to be some sort of a handicap for one, it would also make it a handicap for the other. And I don't know with any certainty that Canelo Alvarez will be able to handle the consistent pressure and punching from Christian Mbilli, because even if it's a style that he normally looks good against, he's now older and more injury-prone than he's ever been, coming off a loss.
An injury. A surgery.
And what about the psychology? mentally of the fighter, because this is the kind of fight to where psychologically you do have to be up for it. It's not just physically taxing, it's mentally taxing. Is Canelo really up for this? Or is he only doing it because they're giving him a fortune to keep fighting? The kind of money that, even if he doesn't want to do it, he's still going to, because look at what they're paying him. This is the kind of opponent to where, mentally, you need to be sharp. You need to be up for it. You can't just go through the motions with this guy on autopilot. Devin thinks this is gonna be easy? I don't know what to think. It's a credible scalp, few boo birds aside. David Benavidez fans still bellyaching that he and Canelo never fought. Aside from them, I don't think you can objectively look at Christian Mbilli as an opponent for Canelo and complain. This promises to be a firefight, whether Canelo wins or Canelo loses. It's a credible opponent. A bigger, younger, unbeaten fighter, unbeaten champion. Mbilli doesn't stop being a credible opponent, a dangerous opponent, because Canelo is the one fighting him. He would be a credible opponent for most anybody else in this division. For Shiraz, for Munguia, Melancuzia, Iglesias, Sajo, Pacheco. So why wouldn't he be a credible opponent for Canelo? Putting things into perspective, Mbilli would be a credible opponent for anybody and everybody at 168. That doesn't all of a sudden change because a few boo birds don't like Canelo. Yeah.
Benavidez, damn, boy. He showed up and showed out, boy. Cinco de Mayo gonna be looking for his ass every single day, Mayo. Hey, Canelo, you want some of that? Cinco de Mayo date? It's Benavidez now. Yeah, it's Benavidez. Yeah, sit your old ass down, Canelo. Sit your old ass down. It's a new sheriff in town, and everybody know it, and everybody saw it last night. His name is David Demastro. Hey, Benavidez. That's his name. Shit, call his ass Machine Gun. Ooh, he had a turret. It's crazy because, like, David can hit you with a fucking single right hand. Like, you guys don't understand, like, how hard that is. Like, Floyd does that shit. Like, it is so hard to, like, throw a single right hand and not leave yourself exposed and out there like that and time that shit. He was hitting them. Man, shit, Inoue was doing the same shit with Nakatani, hitting them with straight right hands, right? Because you gotta come from all the way from the back, shoulder all the way. And so, like, a motherfucker can see this punch coming, and you kind of out there. But the way they throw it, and how quick they throw it, and how accurate that shit is, bro, it's hard to even anticipate, man. It's like a jab coming at your ass. For real. It's that fast, and it's that efficient. Shit, man. And then the left hook was automatic, too. Man, I was waiting on the three Roy Jones, 3, 4, 5, 6 left hooks. That's what I was waiting on. Shit. But then you see him square up inside. I don't give a damn. Yes, he squared the hell up. Yeah, I told y'all he make it work. He know how to make that shit work. And he made it work last night.
I feel like over time, Tim has really settled into his social media persona, because a common trait among social media influencers and content creators is exaggerated reactions. Almost cartoon-like. What I said in my previous video about the earmark in the American boxing scene, predictable outcomes resulting in disproportionate reactions. Tim had David Benavidez winning the fight ahead of the fight, and so did I, but where we're different is, I wasn't surprised. When I saw David Benavidez do to Zurdo what he did, the first thing I thought to myself was, well, this explains it. This is why he wanted to fight this guy, specifically, why he's been planning on doing this for about 2 years.
Even though he knocked him out?
Even with that, the first thing I thought to myself was, well, he did spar this guy for over 100 rounds, and when you do that, you know exactly who and what you're signing up for. I didn't have the disproportionate reaction that Timothy Bradley is now having, claiming that David owns Cinco de Mayo and it's time for Canelo to sit his old self down. I wouldn't say that the conditions are yet set for David Benavidez to come in and take over Cinco de Mayo, or Mexican Independence Day for that matter, because if Canelo Alvarez wins in September and becomes a 2-time super middleweight champion, follows it up by fighting next Cinco de Mayo, will David Benavidez own it then? Will he gamble having his event cannibalized by Canelo's if they have to try to sell a fight on the same day? They keep saying that I'm downplaying David Benavidez' performance by stating the facts, but the facts are what the facts are. And the fact of the matter is, Canelo's fight in September will be bigger than David Benavidez' fight this past weekend.
More people are going to watch it. More people all over the world are going to be paying attention to Canelo's fight than David's fight. And when that's the case, how did David usurp Cinco de Mayo when the only reason that he fought that day is because Canelo didn't? The truth is often mundane.
Sometimes unpopular. It can make you unpopular for not being given to sensationalist headlines and disproportionate reactions, bringing people down to earth and back to the center.
David only fought that day because Canelo didn't, because they knew he was still recovering from arthroscopic surgery.
If they had to go head-to-head with him and sell a fight at the same time, they likely wouldn't have scheduled their fight on that weekend. That's just the truth. That's reality. That's not what some people want to hear.
But that's not David usurping Cinco de Mayo from Canelo either. That's just him acting in his absence, when he's not around. Tantamount to being the substitute teacher, picked on by the students while the real one's on holiday.
So long as Canelo is still alive and kicking, still fighting and still winning, I don't think it's possible for David to usurp either May or September from him, those fight dates.
And so long as Canelo's being paid astronomical amounts of cash for doing so, I don't think you can say that David is the face of boxing, because the earmark for the face of boxing is that's the fighter that makes the most, because their fights generate the most. It's never been different, and it doesn't all of a sudden change because David pounced on an old sparring partner.
The boxing media and the content creators may want to push this media creation, this propaganda that David is the new sheriff in town, but not if Canelo Alvarez is still fighting on those dates.
They're gonna need for Christian Mbilli to beat him. Maybe then.
That's what it would take for Canelo Alvarez to lose in September and stop fighting. Just bow out. Retire.
Over to David Benavidez, who doesn't think his performance against Ramirez will scare off Dimitri Bivol, as they're set to be in preliminary discussions for a fight between them.
Zurdo Ramirez went the distance with the only other opponent to beat him, the same one who Benavidez wants to fight next. Benavidez doesn't believe, however, that his dominant showing will make Dimitri Bivol think twice about facing him. Bivol is expected to beat overmatched mandatory challenger Michael Eifert on May 30th.
In Ekaterinburg, Russia.
I can't answer that question, Benavidez stated during his post-fight press conference following a 6th-round knockout of Ramirez at the T-Mobile Arena. I don't know what these people are thinking. If they're real champions, like how they say they are, they're definitely going to have no problem taking this fight. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Dimitri. I don't think he's going to get scared away. He's a great champion. Russia's Bivol owns the Ring Magazine, IBF, WBA, and WBO light heavyweight titles. Benavidez holds the WBC title because he was elevated from interim to full champion a year ago. Once Bivol declined to make a mandated defense against him, Phoenix's Benavidez told the ring, prior to dominating Ramirez and winning the WBA and WBO cruiserweight crowns, that he believes Bivol will fight him later in the year. Bivol will fight for the first time since he had back surgery in August, when he faces a German contender the IBF installed as mandatory challenger at the UMCC Arena in Ekaterinburg, Russia.
That's at the end of this month, and you will be able to watch that fight from Russia here in the United States via your DAZN subscription.
Bivol, 35, is ranked number 5 on the Ring's pound-for-pound list, 2 spots ahead of Benavidez, 29, who moved up 25 pounds to become champion in a third division. A rubber match with former undisputed light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev also appeals to Bivol. Benavidez hopes to box Bivol and later Beterbiev once he drops back down to the light heavyweight limit of 175 pounds for his next fight.
Well, didn't he say yesterday he wants to fight Dimitri at 190?
That's why we're here, Benavidez said. We are here to give the best of ourselves, and I'm doubted all the time. Everybody always doubts me.
What the fuck's he talking about? He was the favorite going into the Zerto fight.
But every time I get in this ring and I show myself what type of fighter I am, it speaks a lot of volume about me and my character, but I'm ready to fight whoever. I think you guys know that 100% already, wherever it is, whether it's 200, 175, wherever. I'm just here to test myself and test my greatness.
Dimitri's gotta test his back out at the end of this month.
I know of another fighter who had a similar procedure to Dimitri not that long ago. Nina Menka of Germany also had a herniated disc, and she had it worked on, and she had a fight after that. She won.
Though in doing so, she caused that injury to flare up again, and she had to go back in for another corrective procedure. That's the risk that Dimitri Bivol now runs in the Michael Eifert fight. That's why back surgery is often seen as being invasive, that, once you fuck up your back, you fucked up your back.
So fingers crossed that Dimitri not only has a good showing against Michael Eifert, makes it through it like everybody expects him to, but he makes it through injury-free, because you can get injured, even in fights that you win. Now, you often see the boxing scribes write about how David Benavidez was elevated to full champion because Dimitri didn't satisfy him as a mandatory, but it's because he wasn't supposed to yet. The World Boxing Council was not yet next in the rotation of mandatories. It was the IBF.
Michael Eifert isn't some random guy they just picked out of a hat. He's been the mandatory challenger for well over 2 years, having become so in March of 2023.
The night that he beat John Pascal, which was in March of 2023, whereas David, he doesn't even fight as a light heavyweight until a full year later, in June of 2024. By the time David Benavidez is installed as the World Boxing Council's mandatory,
Michael was already in the queue. He was already ahead of him.
and the World Boxing Council knew that. So why did that same World Boxing Council go ahead and order their mandatory if they knew they weren't next? It was so that they would have an excuse to strip Dimitri of the title, so that they would have an excuse to give it to David Benavidez instead. And I noticed that whenever the circumstances of David's elevation to full WBC champion are written about, they leave that part out when that's a pretty important detail.
Why didn't Dimitri fight him?
Because his hands were tied at the time. He already had a mandatory challenger in the queue, and he was also expected to go into a third fight with Artur Beterbiev. At the same time, he's dealing with a nagging back injury. It's almost like they don't want to tell you the full story and what the circumstances were to propagate this image of David as being a bogeyman, shaking down champions for their titles.
A media creation. Why do you think I keep calling him that?
The American media specifically that are desperately building an altar, an idol,
A false one.
for us to worship as the next face of boxing. If you're not paying attention, you might.
Though it doesn't fool me.
Least of all when David Benavidez not but yesterday stated that he would like to offer Dimitri Bivol 190-pound catch weight for the fight between them,
I told you he was gonna do that.
while people are still holding out hope that he can get back down to light heavyweight, get back down there safely. And I haven't seen a single boxing scribe from either Boxing Scene or Bad Left Hook or Ring Magazine or any of the popular periodicals highlight how unlikely it is that David Benavidez will get down from cruiser to light heavy, because it simply doesn't happen.
They go with whatever narrative he gives them, making no light of how unlikely it is.
And then move on to the next narrative once it changes. I mean, you have to ask yourself, if you can get down to 175, why are you now talking about fighting him at 190?
All the common sense has been sucked out of the room, out of the conversation.
To propagate and push this media creation. Frankly, I don't know that they're ever going to fight at 175 at cruiser.
I don't know.